Welcome everyone. My name's Sandra. I'm secretary here at the Community Garden, and my job in this talk is really just to hang a few things together and let you listen to some other interesting voices. It's the session today that's part of Bundanoon's sesquicentenary or 150th birthday, and in a sense the topic we're dealing with, putting local food on the table 150 years on, with that title, We've Done It Before, We'll Grow It Again, which I think probably comes from periods of crisis and challenge during the wars, between wars, and it's kind of a journey looking back in time to paint the picture as best we can as to how people grew food, they had to by necessity here, and then looking forward to how our choices now and the activities we do can shape the world and the food world in particular for ourselves, our children and our grandchildren as we live in times with interesting challenges with a changing climate and resource depletion. Some of you who were here at the festival last year would have heard Rosemary Stanton talk, and she highlighted the fact that we've actually in this period of time of generations lost these connections, the connections between our landscapes and ecosystems, our food, our own health, the local economy, and they're all intricately connected, or they should be. They should be. Rosemary Stanton is a well-known nutritionist, and she's been really supportive of the garden. She presented a concise snapshot of what you say is the modern food supply system. It's a system where a lot of the food is highly processed and highly packaged. This is of course designed mainly for profit, and what's healthy for you, health, is actually a fairly secondary matter in the design of our food supply system. And things like equity and sustainability are basically largely ignored. Food is seen as a commodity to be traded or bought and sold, and that's the main focus, with obviously impacts on the environment. Exports and imports cross over. The same food can fly in one direction and in the other at the same time from country to country, which, I mean, seems crazy, adding all those greenhouse gases, etc. And in the methods of processing and packaging the food, transporting it, storing it, wasting it, a lot of energy and resources goes into that. In fact, not much of the food dollar actually goes to the farmer who grows the food. It goes into all these other activities that have become part of the industrialised food system. Has immediate effects, or has done over generations, and we're seeing the results now on health with increasing rates of obesity, and I think it was Rosemary pointed out to us that the rates of type 2 diabetes have actually tripled over the last 20 years. And while we might seem to have a large choice, you've got 30,000 items in the average supermarket. A lot of the kilojoules that are eaten, around 40% by both children and adults, come from essentially junk food, which is very high in salt, sugar, fat, etc. And the healthcare costs of this we're seeing now, and we'll see more in the future, will be totally unsustainable as well. Just recently, I read of this new genetically modified apple, and it's an example of how the system is not designed to change things for the benefit of us who are going to be eating the apple to make it tastier or healthier. This apple is designed so that you can cut it into slices, and 3 days later those slices will not have turned brown. Now, who is this a benefit for, one might ask? Yes, they can be stored for longer, even longer perhaps than the birthday apples we hear about that have been sitting there for a year in storage. And it's designed to keep them looking beautiful, whereas we might find that in the normal apple growing, all our apples won't be beautiful. There's actually a movement called ugly fruit to get people realising that an apple with a little spot on it that doesn't affect at all what's inside is quite okay to eat. And farmers now often have to plough them in because the supermarkets require them to be of a certain type and uniform colour. And what we've lost in the process, and this is one of Peter Lewinsky's slides, Peter lives locally and has a wonderful, wonderful collection of varieties of apples, including lots of local ones, and he'll be talking on heritage apples later today. And this diversity is a huge loss. It's a loss because we don't get the taste and the nutrition and the variety, the resilience of having different types of apples that will be good if the climate changes in different ways. But it's part of a culture as well that's been lost in the process. And then, in the last month, I also read of this powdery substance called soylent, which is apparently what we'll eat in the post-food world. We're meant to be able to live on this powdery substance and not eat any food at all. This is probably the extreme end, but just the fact that there is so much junk food and processed food means that we're really eating more and more of what Michael Pollan, a food author, has called food-like substances. They are not something that our grandmothers would have even recognised as food, and we're perhaps eating more food than we need to, but getting less nutrition in many ways. The other thing that's broken when you lose the connections to your land and who grows your food is, and this is the worst example I've seen, it's a soup made by Campbell's called Soup in Hand. It's actually pizza flavoured. You can drink it with one hand. It fits in your car's cup holders, and the cup holders are getting bigger all the time. And I think the thing I disliked about it, it actually denies
pizza flavoured soup is what I've always wanted.
Exactly. But it denies those myriad of connections that go on in our act of eating, and the distance that we've placed between ourselves and our food, the connections with the provenance of our food, where it's grown, who grows it, maybe even who cooks it. But the tagline on the soup says, "Your whole life is fast, portable and wireless. Shouldn't your soup be too?" And our current food system, Rosemary again made this point, divorces people from food. And I claim that food's actually incredibly relational matter. Part of the interest, and we've found since the community garden opened, not just here, I think it's all over the country and in fact globally, there's a huge resurgence of interest in regaining knowledge about the provenance of your food and the skills to grow it and perhaps preserve it. And it comes not only from the interest in health and nutrition that Rosemary talked about. I think there also comes from a real desire to reconnect with the earth and be able to talk to the providors and growers as you're able to today, and as well as growing your own food. And that's a significant part. So now to begin briefly, before I hand the microphone over, Bundanoon's 150th. Of course, growing food is not something new to Bundanoon. People came here, and when the railway came to the area, food had to be grown for the people and also for their stock animals. Not surprisingly, there are very few photos when we looked for them, and I thank Bundanoon History Group for supplying these photos. And I think the reason there's so little visual record of food growing is that it was such a normal thing. No one thought it was something special that you take a photo of. And recognising that when people came to Bundanoon, it was a lot of work even to get started. This is possibly around barren ground in the late 1860s. So you had to clear the land. You had to then have the skills and knowledge to get through the different seasons and to supplement this with perhaps what was available in the local landscape. And here is a picture from the then village. We've moved to 1905, looking up to Grice Hill to Fernfield, which is actually where we are now. The clearing's been done, as you can see. And Bundanoon, by the mid-1880s, already then visitors and tourists were starting to come to Bundanoon to enjoy the healthy air and the natural beauty of the place in what's now the National Park. In fact, by the 1940s, I believe there were 64 guest houses in Bundanoon. Like many of the Bundanoon guest houses, Lynbrook, which is now the Youth Hostel, had its own orchards, vegetable gardens, dairy herd and poultry. And this milk and cream and vegetables must have been a great draw card for people from the city especially after war rationing. This would have been a real treat, and they served them many meals a day. It seemed to me they did early breakfast, 11's lunch, high tea, dinner, and then supper. The daughters of the owners of these guest houses must have been kept very busy. They were the ones that ran them for the most part, apparently. And this is Rosnell, but again, self-sufficient. Rosnell is still standing today in residence. And there was much produce from orchards around the Highlands and here in Bundanoon that was shipped off on the train to Sydney and other areas. And here you can see the display of the orchards out towards Penrose at the Royal Easter Show, a winning exhibit, which, I don't know if I got the year for that, 1921, that exhibit. So, while there are always variations, of course, in the seasons each year, Bundanoon then probably enjoyed more of what's now called food sovereignty for everyone. More local resilience, actually, in the village to withstand external shocks and disruptions, because today we're told if those fresh food trucks stopped coming here on the highway, the supermarket would hold about 3 to 5 days of food, and that's essentially what we now use as our larders. In earlier times, the surplus would have been preserved, and that resilience continued because people had the skills and knowledge to be able to do that. And as you may not know, but Australia has been for a while now a net fresh food importer, not an exporter, and that's surprising for people. Many of these skills of producing food have been lost, of course, in recent time. In my family, it was lost, after my grandmother, because she didn't hand it on to my parents. And it's interesting again that the interest in relearning it is happening right now when it's such a critical time.